The man who started the World Economic Forum is a chap called Klaus Schwab, and I would describe him as a puppet of the New World Order. There must be people who's pulling his strings, and he's been speaking about this economic reset.
Indeed, and he's written a book, and the title of it is indeed COVID-19 and the Great Reset. That's the actual title of the book, which was published fairly recently.
Right. Now, the word he uses to describe this new system that's coming is stakeholder capitalism.
That's right, yes.
Right.
Yes.
I'll try and describe that as best I can. It's capitalism, but i.e. that you can buy and sell and run businesses, but there's a whole load of additional people that or entities that you must consider when you're doing trade. So you must be friendly to the environment. You must be consider the population growth. You must consider all sorts of issues. You must consider people in poor countries. You must consider all sorts of things, which sounds very socialist. It sort of sounds nice, but whether it works in practice or not is another thing. Because traditionally, a business is set up to make profit, to make money, and it's serving its shareholders. So that would be a traditional business, albeit that they have to work within a regulated place where the government always set all regulations anyway. We already have regulations for business, but this is on a different level, that businesses are going to have their hands tied. And I suspect what they want to do with this is to get rid of all small businesses. They want corporate businesses, because I think small businesses are going to find it really hard on this new monetary system with all of these conditions to make money. You can't, because as a small business, you can cut corners, you can improvise, you can use your initiative, but I think all that's going to be taken away.
It already has for a lot of people, hasn't it? I mean, we've seen a lot of small businesses have failed, and I've seen quite a few YouTube videos made by people who've just lost their business in 2-3 months because of all the measures.
And all of the tax will be collected automatically because they can just run a computer program or have that on their app, their central app, and so it'll have complete oversight of all the world's economy, which, if you think about that isn't a bad thing for a government to know where all of the money's been spent, because obviously you use cash in a business, then you don't pay, people avoid tax, don't they?
Yeah.
So it will cut down on tax evasion, but it just seems so draconian.
I mean, a lot of these things tie in with communitarianism, which is like communism, and they look good on paper, like all these sustainable development goals and stuff. They look great on paper, but when you look at how they're going to implement them, that's when you start to see problems.
Yeah, Simon Dixon describes the IMF as being socialist-minded, and he says that they've always been socialist-minded, and they try to introduce some kind of central digital currency a previous time. It's to do with the G20, but that was just to operate within the central banks. I think it wasn't for the man on the street. Right. We presume that they've got all of the computer code and everything worked out for this, and that the World Economic Forum is just being used to sell it. And this is one thing I noticed about the World Economic forums, is they have these people on stage as if it's like the sort of conference that me and you would go to and speak at, and you don't know what the person's going to say, but they do know what the person's going to say. They're all very staged. Even when they have discussions, you can see that there's been a set, agreed agenda as to what they're going to say and what they're going to talk about. So really, they're more they're more selling ideas rather than discussing ideas to people who want to watch the World Economic Forum. I mean, completely, it's not democratically elected.
No, not at all.
So they have to use these, as we said earlier. What was the word that it described in I think it was the Rockefeller document? It said non-state actors or non-state players.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is organisations and personalities like Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, whoever else, the chair of the World Health Organization, all these non-state players who really, they shouldn't be on our TV screens.
No.
They should have no power or influence whatsoever.
But
we shouldn't be even looking at Davos. Those people are not elected.
To do with us.
They should have no say. And really, you could say the same for the World Bank and the IMF, although that they are run and owned by the countries of the world.
Yeah.
But it seems that they're not really.
Yeah. You know, I
You
mean,
know, did all of the countries of the world get together to come up with this IMF Bretton Woods agreement? I doubt it.
yeah.
So I don't think all of the countries of the world are running the IMF and the
No.
World Bank.
No, certainly not.
It's an elite clique
Yeah.
that you can't really get
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. You know, and you think at least, though I have no faith in the British Parliament anymore, and I haven't had for a long time.
You don't say.
Exactly. But, you know, we do have a route to communicate with them. I mean, we've spoken earlier on about how we wrote to our MPs.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're not, the responses are just, well, crap, really. But at least we get some communication going. Are we going to be able to communicate with these people in the World Economic Forum and get what they don't have any accountability to us. An MP at least has some, maybe it's an illusion of accountability. That is still there at the moment. So we're going to lose all that side of things.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's there might be some beneficial things about this system, right? People might hate me for saying that, right? If you're a government, then automated tax is a good thing if you're a government, right? But we haven't had a say. The people of the world haven't had a say in a new monetary system.
No.
And if they allowed, well, look, things shouldn't have been made to get into a situation where they're going to crash, where banks are going to fall, because we shouldn't have had the COVID scam.
No.
And if we hadn't had the COVID scam, then we shouldn't have had the debt-based monetary system in the first place. And that goes back hundreds of years. So if none of that had happened, you know, the world would be fine, and the world would be fine on whatever currency naturally comes about.
And I think the underlying thing is here, that like a lot of these things, you know, the outcome they paint looks good. It looks good on paper, and it looks as if it's going to give a more fair and equitable society. But the point is, we can't trust these people because they have actually persuaded us that that is, a good thing, because they've deceived us. Mm-hmm. Their underlying pattern and behaviour is one of deception. Mm-hmm. That's why we cannot trust, these systems that they're proposing, because they have tried to move us towards accepting them because of a massive deception.
A massive Hegelian dialectic, as David Icke has been banging on about, and he's absolutely right.
It is right,
it's one massive Hegelian dialectic, and I'm just thinking there of a talk I gave in 2013, I might show a bit of that. I actually said we might see entire governments going bust.
Yeah.
That's because, they were leveraging up the debt then, trillions. And I think I worked out then it was £45,000 per person. Because there are 30 million taxpayers in the UK, and the current debt, took me a while to get these notes right, the current government debt is 1.4 trillion. Now that's a bit of a misnomer, government debt. What that is taxpayer debt, because the government's going to get it from taxpayers. UK taxpayer debt is 1.4 trillion. So if you divide 30 million into 1.4 trillion, you get just under £47,000 each, right? So that's debt, that's your debt that the government's holding on your behalf, right? So if you haven't got that much spare, then you're in debt as well. And remember, it's not an accident, in my opinion, it's not an accident, it's a control mechanism. So why are they doing this? Why are they pushing national governments, and all national governments seem to have debt, personal debt? I think it's a control mechanism. I don't like to try and predict what they're trying to do, because they don't invite me to their tea parties, right? These people who orchestrate this, but I'm pretty certain that it is orchestrated, it's deliberate. We might see whole countries going bankrupt so that they can then be taken into a more central political structure, the New World Order that people talk about. That's perhaps what's going on here. But as I say, you won't see someone on Question Time actually make the statement that it's all deliberate. It's not accidental economic cycles that create the debt. I don't buy that for 1 second. So, and when you then marry what they want to do with this new currency with what they want to do with tracing or giving you an identity and tracing and tagging you, the two together then become very Orwellian.
Techno-slavery system.
Yeah.
Now, we I think we did briefly mention the Bill Gates ID 2020 sort of patents, and that seems to be a key part of the concepts we're discussing here too.
Right. Have you got another 10 minutes?
We could maybe do.
We've got to get the Charles Lieber stuff in.
Should we do all that after lunch?
Oh, are you okay to come back?
Yeah, I'll come back. Yeah.
Oh, right,
yeah.
I was rushing a bit there. You see.
No.
I think we did really well there, considering I don't understand it.
No, that was great. No, it's brilliant. No.
So before we finish this section, Andrew, people are thinking that they're going to get back to normal, whatever that might mean, with a supposed vaccine or what have you. Now, I got a very interesting email from a viewer, and it ties in with, did you see the video of Bill Gates and Melinda Gates where they're smirking their heads off at the thought of the next virus?
Yes, I did.
Let's just have a look at that.
So we, we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is will get attention this time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, so that's pretty sinister if you ask me.
It is.
Now, just listen to this from a viewer. He says, the fact that COVID is a scam is much more widely understood than anything before, including 9/11. And I think you've made that point yourself, didn't you?
I agree, yes.
Right?
Yes.
See attached railway graffiti photo I took in East London. So there's more knowledge that this is a scam than other scams, right? I can't help feeling Bill Gates is the deliberate false front guy for this, to distract our attention from the real COVID agenda, depopulation and possibly an economic reset. He probably is sucked in 100% for the reasons you state, but it is too obvious. Event 201 cannot justify every government agreeing to flush their economies down the toilet. There is something much bigger at play. We need to look at all the new empty hospitals, tents and morgues. They aren't setting all this up to look stupid like they overestimated the risk. When COVID wave 2 strikes, or perhaps another disease altogether, or toxin, whatever it is, people will rebel and protest, and I speculate this will be allowed. Then, when this strain does prove deadly, whatever it is, it could be a toxin, it might not be a virus, so something that is going to kill a lot of people might be coming along, which, when you look at that smirk on Bill Gates' face, it does make you think that, right? So something's going to come along blamed on a virus that is going to kill a lot of people. This is what he's saying. The awake that are protesting in packs will be vilified and portrayed as murderers. So in other words, people like you and I have been saying it's a scam. When people do start dropping down dead on the street in droves, they're going to turn against us because we are saying there's no virus. Everyone will hate them, thus killing the opposition movement. Yeah. Right? Yeah. In one simple act. Whatever has been planned or prepared can then play out without opposition. Right?
I think there's a distinct possibility of that, something like that scenario unfolding. And I mean, we've already seen that on a small scale, with arguments breaking out in families, and people being blamed for spreading the virus and stuff. And in fact, I went down and did a loud hailing thing in Birmingham. This was in August, and that was covered on a website, Birmingham Alive, sort of local newspaper website. And they actually did quote me accurately, interestingly enough, in what I said. But then they put a picture of me taken from a distance. I think they'd taken it off somebody's Twitter feed or something. And there was a picture of my face with me, I think, holding a microphone. And the caption, they didn't bother coming to ask me my name. The caption said, infection rates increase in Birmingham. And that was the caption for my picture in this thing. Infection rates have doubled or increased in Birmingham this week or something, Right. And that was the caption for me, Right. So that of course ties up with this blame agenda, which could be that, as what your viewer described it, that could be another extreme version of it.
It's Bill Gates is clearly in the know, and he's not smirking for no reason.
Right.
We know he's got no morals, so that smirk, that's just, to me, tells me a lot. That there's something different coming.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll continue this a little bit later. So we've been discussing the power groups that are behind everything that's going on, and one commentator that I've mentioned is Brendan O'Connell. People can look up his YouTube site. He's got a lot of YouTube videos, and it's quite difficult to get a grasp on exactly what he's saying because there's a lot of offshoots from it. He names a lot of people, but trying to summarise, He describes the New World Order as Wall Street and City of London bankers, and I think that will include Rothschild, and generals who sit on the board of Lockheed, including and Henry Kissinger as well. And I think he's named other people who are part of this alleged clique, who are running this. What's happening now with the world economy? Anyway, he refers to them as trillionaire bankers.
Right.
Now, I think mainstream would argue that there's no one worth $1 trillion in the world, and not even control that many assets. So this is where we get the disparity between what you might call conspiracy theorists and mainstream. You can't reconcile the two and know fully who's behind the world's banking system and how much power they have behind the world's banking system. Now, what O'Connell suggests is that they're going to try and create a split between Eurasia and North and South America, so the two halves of the world, and create a new Cold War. Now, that Cold War is going to involve certain high technology drones, which can basically take people out, either on the ground or in the air. At some point, he states there's going to be an agreement 2028 to 2030, and this is all tied up with Agenda 2030, where the two sides are going to agree, and then the technology that's been used in this Cold War is then going to be turned on the public, and there's going to be a mass sort of cull, if you like. He agrees with us that there's some sort of takedown of the US, a coup in the US, and that he suggests that you've got to be wary of Trump, and that Trump has facilitated some of it, right? Perhaps unwittingly, I don't know. Now, he also speaks a lot about Israel and Israel's position in the whole geopolitical landscape with regards to this issue, and his opinion that Israel is very close to Russia, that Netanyahu and Putin are like that, and that Israel even supplied Russia with the vaccine, but I don't think Russia's admitted that. And also close to Iran and China. So Israel is kind of this central state, if you like, between East and West, which is, according to Brendan O'Connell, is far more important than people realise. And the other reason why it's important, according to O'Connell, is that the power structure within Israel, the intelligence community, have been stealing a lot of American technology and brain power from various companies, including Intel. I'll just read this. The Intel CEO apparently said, "We think of ourselves as an Israeli company as much as a US company." So that's an indication that Intel itself considers itself to have an Israeli future. Israel has the United States high technology civilian and military infrastructure totally subverted. Companies such as Intel and Microsoft are increasingly run from Israel. So the Windows updates apparently come from Israel, and the COVID tracking apps were written in Israel. And according to
according to O'Connell.
According to O'Connell, and it does present certain media articles to back this up. That there's a move of the technocracy that we were talking about is being there's forces trying to move it into Israel, so Israel becomes the world technocracy capital. I think that's what he's suggesting.
When I heard one of the O'Connell videos, it was actually a lady called Julia, I think, that alerted me to this chap, because I hadn't heard of him until very recently, and he was talking about Trump. And just to sort of follow on from what you were saying, if we consider that Trump isn't really pro-Israel, he might not be anti-Israel for all I know, but I haven't heard much commentary in the mainstream, or not in the alternative media, that Trump is either pro or anti-Israel. There's no discussion of Trump and Israel. So what I'm thinking is that if Trump comes in 2016, Obama, I think, was pro-Israel, or he was forced to be pro-Israel, because we covered that in the last show that we did on the Felton book, didn't we? There was talk of Obama tried to be sort of slightly not pro-Israel, and then his hand was forced, whatever you think of how that unfolded. But my point is that if Israel decided that it was going to be too much like hard work to get Trump on board because, he changed too many people around, or he was just the wrong sort of guy for them or something, it would then make sense that they would start try to buddy up with Putin if Putin was receptive to that, or whoever else, to build their associations and their clandestine power in other countries and sort of start moving away from the US more if they didn't feel that was going to be productive.
Right. And well, according to O'Connell, the links between Russia and Israel go a long way into the past.
And it's very interesting. We didn't even touch on that, did we, in the previous? And I've never heard of that before, Brendan O'Connell.
Right. And we've also got Netanyahu has met with Jacob Rothschild. Rothschild has given money to Israel for particular projects. And obviously, we know also that Kissinger is friendly with Jacob Rothschild as well. So the question arises then, is this power group, assuming that the New World Order does consist of the people who O'Connell suggests, they must be then behind the IMF, you would imagine. But the IMF ostensibly is just owned by all of the countries in the world. Perhaps some of the more powerful countries are more predominant, but we're not told that because it's the IMF that's driving this Bretton Woods thing, and you've got the World Economic Forum. Are these people behind these organizations? Is there any evidence that certain players who we think are in the New World Order, like Soros and others, are behind some of these Quango organizations, the World Economic Forum and what have you? Can we sort of build a picture of what the New World Order structure is and how it is bringing about this new monetary system? So according to O'Connell, the new technology, which is going to be the backbone of the new financial system, which I think he says will include cryptocurrency. He says it's this new financial system is going to be based on i.e. blockchain, whereas I think Simon Dixon suggests not. He thinks that the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies are going to be separate from this new digital currency. I guess we'll see probably later next year. But O'Connell asks the question, is Israel making promises to Russia, China and Iran in relation to the rollout of this ideology and technology? Is this why these countries, which are not normally aligned to the West, are going along with the COVID agenda? Because they're being made promises by Israel over the new world after the fourth industrial revolution that's going to appear, with Israel siphoning off technology and expertise from America. So, I mean, we discussed who is going to own the license to when they start microchipping the population, and we're going to come on to that subject in a second. Who's going to own the license to it? It could be that there's some sort of battle as to who's going to own that technology, who's going to be the single licensee for the technology that runs the financial systems and the bio-identity systems that we've been talking about. And I think Israel is putting itself in first position as far as I can tell. And here's a quote from Benjamin Netanyahu. He says, "And history favours large nations, not small ones." We know Israel is a small nation. "So we have to compensate for relevant numbers, and we compensate. We've always compensated with our brains and with our guts, but we are in a position to compensate beyond anything that we dreamed of." Interesting quote. And he's buddied up with Bill Gates as well, Netanyahu, and there are other quotes as well, which suggest that Israel is becoming a technology hub. I'm going to talk about Wuhan now, right? Because this could link into something that I've just mentioned. It might seem like we're going backwards here, but we're not really. So I put a map up on the screen there of Wuhan, and I've marked 3 or 4 things of significance, right? So the first is the seafood market, the Huanan seafood market, where allegedly the coronavirus sort of got started and then spread from there on, from a bat or spat soup or something, whatever it might be. That's where it's supposed to have started.
Yeah.
We've got the Wuhan, people have mentioned the Wuhan lab, level 4 security lab, Institute of Virology. Now it's not right next door, but we've got 2 kilometers, so I don't know, it's 8 miles there. It's maybe 15, 16 miles away as the crow flies, right? And people have said, well, there's this level 4 lab in Wuhan, so maybe it originated there. There's a few videos you can go online and watch people who are suggesting this. Now, I think they present a weak argument for that, or they say it was maybe something experimental, that they were messing around with a vaccine and it got out into the population somehow. Farrell is claiming that the Obama administration halted some sort of dodgy research, so it was secretly moved to China by Tony Fauci, right? Because Obama had put an end to it, as if he would, right? Now, I don't believe that, right? Now, the Obama administration was a globalist controlled, or is a globalist controlled entity, so I don't believe that. But that's what the official story is, that Tony Fauci somehow secretly funneled funds to China to do some sort of research to connect it with this lab. Right, so looking at this map, right, we've got the lab, which is about 16 miles south of the supposed seafood market. Now, one thing that I didn't know was that there was a US military delegation of athletes visited right next door to the seafood market. I'm just going to read this. So this is the delegation of 300 US military athletes which arrived in Wuhan in mid-October to participate in the 2019 Military World Games. They stayed in the Wuhan Oriental Hotel right next to the Huanan Seafood Market. See map. So I've done a map of that. So it's literally round the block, round the corner. You've got 300 US athletes staying next to this market where this supposed virus broke out. It was around here that the first cluster in Wuhan appeared of persons diagnosed with COVID-19. 42 employees of the Oriental Hotel were diagnosed with C19, that being the first cluster in Wuhan, when only 7 people from the seafood market had been diagnosed as C19 positive, all of which had had contact with the 42 from the hotel. So from that, if you go down this line that there was a contagious virus that started in that area, you would assume it started in the hotel from that, not in the seafood market. So were these 300, was this delegation of 300 US athletes, were there some spooks in there that were 42 of them actors? Were they pretending to have symptoms? I don't know. So this just muddies the whole water of the Wuhan story and the Wuhan outbreak. But I've not heard this reported in mainstream about there being a military athletes, US athletes in Wuhan. Nick goes on to say that Wuhan has a reputation for thick air pollution, and by clearing the sky, its lockdown probably saved thousands of lives. Well, I'm not sure about that. More importantly, Wuhan was the primary test city for the Chinese installation of 5G, with about 10,000 masts all around the city. It was fully switched on by November the 1st, synchronizing with the outbreak, and we saw that in the UK as well.
There's been some talk of that, in several areas. So the question there is are the symptoms caused by, electromagnetic radiation?
Now, there's another quote from Nick's book. He says that there was both an ABC report and also an Israeli intel report, interesting, Israeli, revealing that as far back as late November of 2019, the National Center for Medical Intelligence was warning of a new virulent contagion in Wuhan getting out of hand. This information had allegedly been gained from wire intercepts plus satellite images. If indeed that warning of a potential catastrophic pandemic had been given, it was 1 month too early. Right, so it's further indication that the whole thing is just a setup. Nick's got an interesting table there I've just drawn people's attention to, which is the UK, US and China, and it gives the total number of alleged coronavirus deaths, the total population, and then the deaths per million. So you've got 617 deaths per million in the UK, 277 deaths per million in the US, and 3 deaths per million in China. So it just seems that China didn't quite get the propaganda right.
No.
Britain was top of the propaganda in that table, I think, followed by America, and then I think that's what that table tells me, is how many deaths were they able to attribute to this, not how many deaths were there. Right. If it was a genuine thing, those deaths per million should all line up. They should be within
a lot closer than they are. Yeah, certainly.
All right, now let's just come back to this map of Wuhan then, because there's another thing on that map which is of interest, which is Wuhan University of Technology, which again we see is only a few miles just across the river from both the hotel and the seafood market. Now this is where Charles Lieber, who is a nano scientist who tries to make technology that will interface the brain with electronics. And I'm going to read some papers in a second about that. So he had worked on these projects at Wuhan University on nanotechnologies. Nothing to do with virology or what have you. Now, there was an article which popped up, which in my opinion was just a piece of disinformation, and it was quoted by Great Game Media. Now, I don't know it's disinformation, but having read some of Lieber's papers, I suspect it's disinformation. It says that it says that Charles Lieber was investigating what it calls virus transmitters. So nanowire, it says that the nanowire batteries that he'd been working on was just a smokescreen. Now, he may have worked on nanowire batteries, but there's one of his colleagues that works on the power system for his nanotechnologies. He's working more on the interfacing technology, not the power technology, as I will read in a moment. So I don't think, it might not be the most accurate description of Charles Lieber's work, describing it as nanowire batteries, but I don't think it's a smokescreen. I think using the word virus transmitters is highly misleading, because I don't think any of Charles Lieber's work really is to do with viruses, or that he's trying to trigger viruses with his technology, having read his papers.
Right.
Because this is what Joseph Farrell was trying to say, that is Fauci in league with Charles Lieber so that they can use their creepy technology to simulate or trigger viruses in the brain or elsewhere, right? Now, I don't think that's true at all. I think Charles Lieber's work is something completely different. Why are we talking about Charles Lieber? I haven't mentioned that. Charles Lieber was arrested in America, because he was in America. He works between America and China, I believe, for espionage or sharing secrets with China or using funds inappropriately. So it looks like that there's some sort of fight over his research between someone in the US and perhaps someone in China or even elsewhere. Could be Israel, we don't know, right? But there's some controversy over the work he was involved with, and he was arrested right at the start of the coronavirus scam, right? I've got the date somewhere, I can put that on the screen. So this guy's arrested. He's worked in Wuhan on this technology. Now, I'm going to go through the technology that he was working on, because I think it's important that you get an understanding of exactly the kind of thing he was into. This might get a little bit nerdy, but bear with it if you're not a nerd. Right, so I'm going to read a little bit on Charles Lieber first. So Charles M. Lieber is the Joshua and Beth Friedman University Professor, Chair of the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, and faculty member in the Center for Brain Science and Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Harvard University. So there's a lot of engineering really in what Lieber's doing.
Right.
I would say more so than the biology, or equal amounts. Lieber has pioneered the field of nanoscience and emerging nanotechnologies, including groundbreaking advances at the boundary between nanoelectronics and medicine, as well as developing the first three-dimensional nanoelectronic arrays that can be seamlessly integrated into the brain. He has published over 400 articles. Now, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this, right? So the dates are important. This paper came out in 2018, so this is a few years ago, and this is talking about mesh electronics. So when they put in probes to read your brain neural activity,
Yep.
they can do that. They can put a probe and put it on a single neuron, right, and they can monitor on a computer that brainwave activity, and
Right.
they can also send signals to it to stimulate it, right? But they can only do it in a limited way because it's invasive. The probe that they put in has to go through your brain
Yeah,
to
right
get
through your skull, yeah.
to get to the. But what this mesh stuff does is it's like wobbly material. It's like a mesh, very 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 fine mesh. It's like an electronic component effectively, or an electronic platform. But it's a tiny piece of mesh. It's extremely thin, and it can actually be sucked up into a syringe. Okay, and they've made it so that it's very similar to the consistency of brain material, right? So you inject it into the brain, right, and then it opens out, and it's less invasive to the brain. So the brain kind of gets in between all the gaps. This mesh has got a lot of gaps within it, and the brain then just fills those gaps and springs back to what it was, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So it's putting something inside the brain without damaging the brain too much, right? And at certain points within this mesh are probes which will then interface with your brain neurons, and those signals can then be read. So your brain activity can be read. So I'm just going to read some extracts from this 2018 paper first, just to give people an idea of this technology. So mesh electronics for brain science. To move from an in vitro scaffold, which means in a test tube, because they've done all this, they would grow brain cells in order to experiment with this. So they would do it in a test tube. In order to move from an in vitro scaffold for synthetic tissue to implantable neural probes for in vivo, which means inside your body, electrophysiology, 4 key issues must be addressed. The first, a minimally invasive delivery method that affords precise targeting of brain regions, needs to be developed for implantation of mesh electronics. Second, the interface between mesh electronics and neural tissue must be characterized to quantify any chronic immune response and probe tissue interactions. Third, a method to make the I/O, the input-output connections, is required for in vivo electrophysiology. Last, it is critical to evaluate the single neuron level chronic recording stroke stimulation stability afforded by tissue mimicking mesh electronics. So the mesh mimics brain tissue.
Right.
Right, and it can reside there inside your brain without your brain really noticing it. So I'll expand on one of those 4 areas. The ultra flexibility of submicron thick mesh structure is readily apparent in aqueous solution, where the mesh probes literally suspend much like colloids. Unlike conventional rigid probes that they use to connect to your brain, that are directly inserted to the brain at the cost of long-term immune response and chronic recording instability, the ultra-flexibility of mesh electronics opens up a simple solution commonly used in biology for delivery of biomolecules and cells, direct syringe injection through a needle. So they can inject it just with a syringe, right? Now, once suspended in aqueous solution, a centimeter scale mesh electronics probe can be drawn into a syringe needle. So the thing is actually, it's big enough to see, but you can still draw it through a needle, right? And then injected under positive pressure into tissue or solution. So conventional rigid and non-porous silicon, tungsten and carbon probes typically produce glial scarring. So the older technologies that they've used have all these problems when they've been put inside someone's brain. They've got this connected, in this example, they've got it connected to 3 brain neurons. So they've got 3, you've got billions of brain neurons in your head. So they've connected probes via this mesh stuff, right, to 3 brain neurons, and they've got a graph there showing the activity, right? So now the paper that he wrote just before he was arrested, so we're coming more up to date now. So this is October, the 25th of October 2019. I'll just read the abstract. So this is entitled Nanowire Probes Could Drive High-Resolution Brain Interfaces. Now, nanowire probes, it means FET probes. So these are field effect transistors, which we know from electrical engineering, but they're absolutely tiny, right? And they can actually go inside a brain neuron and feed back the signal live of a brain neuron. And the point with what this paper is saying is that they can do it with lots of brain neurons and get parallel recording of your brain activity, right? So I'll just read this. It says, a central challenge in the field of electrophysiology is to achieve intercellular recording of the complex networks of electronic cell in tissues. The historical gold standard of intracellular recording, patch clamp electrodes, do have limitations in terms of their invasiveness and difficulty to use in large-scale parallel recording. Recent advances in nanowire-based bioelectronics have demonstrated minimally invasive intercellular interfaces and highly scalable parallel recording to the network level, combined with in vivo, meaning inside your body, recording platforms. So in other words, there'll be a chip there that these wires attach to from your neuron that can actually store the data, right? And there's also a power system, miniature batteries that the other guy in this paper works on. He's at Surrey University. Combined with the in vivo recording platforms, these advances can enable investigations of dynamics in the brain and drive the development of new brain-machine interfaces with unprecedented resolution and precision. So brain-machine interfaces can serve as bidirectional connections, so it's both directions. You can stimulate these brain neurons as well as read what they're doing, that output electrical signals of brain activity or input electrical stimuli to modulate brain activity in order to connect with external machines, including computer processors and prosthetics for human enhancement. To achieve the most information-rich readings, which could provide more detailed mapping of brain function and the finest control of neural prosthetics, electronic devices need to provide access to intracellular signals from multiple neurons. So they've got to get it into more than just 3 neurons in your head, which is what they've achieved by the look of this. So you've got the parallel, and there's the picture. So that's the more later one, the field effect transistor probe, and you can see it's better than the previous ones that they've used. And this diagram shows the various neurons in somebody's brain all being monitored by a field effect transistor, which is fed, or it's actually put into the brain using this very clever mesh stuff. So at the end of this paper, it says the human brain contains about 86 billion neurons, and they are wired into complex circuits to process information conveyed by electrical signals. To study a large number of neurons in the brain via intracellular recording, the conventional method of patch clamp electrode is limited by its large micrometer tip size, and it can only read from a few neurons at a time. Recent advances in nanowire intercellular probes have achieved parallel fabrication of nanowire FET arrays, thereby addressing the long-standing challenge of scalable intercellular electrical recording with minimal invasiveness. Looking into the future, this deterministic nanowire-based fabrication strategy could be incorporated into other platforms, such as syringe injectable mesh electronics for multi-site 3D in vivo measurements. And then it goes on to say that they can be put in the optic nerve or your spinal column, not just the brain. Stable recording and interrogation of the same individual neurons in the neuron networks promises to help decipher complex neurological disorders which develop over time, thus driving advanced BMIs with higher resolution and perhaps eventually bringing cyborgs to reality.
So that's the bottom line then. So what he's talking about is a set of technology which will
link your brain to the internet.
Yeah.
Or any other electronic device. So we've all got one of these, right, which is linked to the internet, right? Now, when you set this up, it's constantly trying to get your data, your geographical position into the cloud, into your Google Cloud account, your documents, etc., etc. So if your brain, you don't need the phone now. We can put everything that's in there in a chip inside your head, so you don't need it. But obviously, that data is then going to be harvested.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as it's connected, you're not going to have control over where it's going to go.
There's another paper which was published fairly recently as well, which I've mentioned to a couple of people. It came onto my radar, I think, in about March or April. It's about the Internet of Bodies, not the Internet of Things, and not the Internet of People, but the Internet of Bodies, which from that paper from Charles Liebert sounds like, that would be an enabling technology to implement an Internet of Bodies.
So this paper is what he was working on. This is published October 2019, a few months before he was arrested over this contention over.
Yep.
So I think somebody knows that this is important for this agenda. Now, there's a very interesting clip from the World Economic Forum where there's a guy, one of these plebs, one of these flunkies that they put on the World Economic Forum, and it's at Davos, and he's actually talking about how the brain can be, he uses the word hacked, Why he would use that word, I don't know, but he says that the brain can be hacked and then it will be harvested for data, but this will be, your thoughts will be hacked. So if you've got enough of your neurons monitored and it's recording the electrical signals, they can then learn what signals are. If you're thinking, let's say you're in fear, they'll be able to learn what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And that then becomes known to the outside world. So I'm just going to have a look at that clip from the World Economic Forum.
We are already in the midst of an AI arms race, with China and the USA leading the race, and most countries being left far, far behind. Unless we take action to distribute the benefits and power of AI between all humans, AI will likely create immense wealth in a few high-tech hubs, while other countries will either go bankrupt or will become exploited data colonies. Now, we aren't talking about a science fiction scenario of robots rebelling against humans. We are talking about far more primitive AI, which is nevertheless enough to disrupt the global balance. Alongside inequality, the other major danger we face is the rise of digital dictatorships that will monitor everyone all the time. This danger can be stated in the form of a simple equation, which I think might be the defining equation of life in the 21st century. B times C times D equals R, which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans, R. If you know enough biology and you have enough computing power and data, you can hack my body and my brain and my life, and you can understand me better than I understand myself. You can know my personality type, my political views, my sexual preferences, my mental weaknesses, my deepest fears and hopes. You know more about me than I know about myself. And you can do that not just to me, but to everyone. A system that understands us better than we understand ourselves can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. Now, in the past, many tyrants and governments wanted to do it, but nobody understood biology well enough, and nobody had enough computing power and data to hack millions of people. Neither the Gestapo nor the KGB could do it. But soon, at least some corporations and governments will be able to systematically hack all the people. We humans should get used to the idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We are now hackable animals. That's what we are. The power to hack human beings can, of course, be used for good purposes, like providing much better healthcare. But if this power falls into the hands of a 21st century Stalin, the result will be the worst totalitarian regime in human history, and we already have a number of applicants for the job of 21st century Stalin. When everybody has to wear a biometric bracelet which constantly monitors your blood pressure, your heart rate, your brain activity, 24 hours a day. You listen to a speech on the radio by the great leader, and they know what you actually feel. You can clap your hands and smile, but if you're angry, they know you'll be in the gulag tomorrow morning. Because as humans will rely on AI to make more and more decisions for us, authority will shift from humans to algorithms. And this is already happening. Already today, billions of people trust the Facebook algorithm to tell us what is new. The Google algorithm tells us what is true. Netflix tells us what to watch. and the Amazon and Alibaba algorithms tell us what to buy. In the not so distant future, similar algorithms might tell us where to work and whom to marry, and also decide whether to hire us for a job, whether to give us a loan, and whether the central bank should raise the interest rate. And if you ask why you were not given a loan, or why the bank didn't raise the interest rate, the answer will always be the same. Because the computer says no.
Computer says no.
So this is so it's been discussed at the World Economic Forum, but the guy, he's not going into any of the detail. He's not going into any of the actual technology. He's more talking about it in a political sense. The hacking of your brain and humans being connected to governments or whoever via their brain. Now,
but this is all connects into this technocracy scheme of things, and having an AI controlled system,
yeah,
which is basically running most stuff, and everybody's plugged into it.
Yeah. So I think now that I've covered those two things, I think we can just highlight this Microsoft
Right.
patent application, right, which is a cryptocurrency system. Now, did you treat this seriously when you first saw it? Because a few people sent me this. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I did, but it looks like a serious idea, and it is really only an extension of what we have now. And when I looked at it as an idea, it did seem like one of these, again, a sort of technocrat's dream, an extension of what we have now, in that, certainly with the COVID scam, many more people have been working at home and using, online conferencing and video conferencing and things. So you're stuck in your own home, generating wealth for somebody, assuming you're still working for a company or an organisation. And I'm the same. I work for a distance learning university, so I'm doing the same thing. So this was really, to me, looking at that patent, whatever you might think of it, it was the next logical step,
right,
where basically you're directly plugged into it. You don't have a keyboard or anything, and your brain is then directly being monitored and influenced to do certain activities for which. You can describe the patent for which you get credits.
Yeah, and it had a weird number, patent number 666 was in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I forget the exact number. But
I'll read this. It's a cryptocurrency system. A server may provide a task to a device of a user which is communicatively coupled to the server. A sensor communicatively coupled to or comprised in the device of the user may sense body activity of the user. Right, may sense body activity of the user. So that could be brainwave activity, right?
Yeah.
Body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. The cryptocurrency system communicatively coupled to the device of the user may verify if the body activity, i.e. your thoughts, data satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system. And award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. So let me interpret that. If you think the right thoughts, we're going to give you money.
Yeah.
If you think the right way, that's what that's saying, isn't it?
Essentially.
So you're going to be able to mine cryptocurrency with your own brain, just like they use computers to mine them now. You need a lot of processing power. But according to that, the idea is that as long as you think the right thoughts, we'll reward you.
And this is all part of the technocrats' way of doing things.
And if you have the technology that Charles Lieber's working on, that would be a reality.
Yeah.
So
that Charles Lieber would be an enabling technology for that sort of system.
Yeah. And the thing is, they're ambiguous. They're saying body activity. They don't say brain activity.
Right.
But really, that could mean brain activity.
Could mean, because the brain is part of your body.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to mean that. So, is this part of the whole monetary reset?
Maybe, and it is very much. I think we haven't mentioned, but this is like the Matrix. It's like the film The Matrix. It's very much like that. And I think, we were talking earlier about how medical professionals won't speak out or won't let themselves be known. They'll speak out, but maybe remain anonymous. So in essence, we already have a thought control system. In other words, if these medical professionals speak out, they'd lose their credits, they'd lose their jobs, so they wouldn't get any income. So they're already being threatened with not being rewarded for not saying or thinking the right things.
Well, if you think about it, we already have thought control systems, don't we?
Yes.
We've got the media, right? We've got the internet, right? But they're fairly direct, but they're not completely direct into your brain.
No.
And similarly with the monetary system, the debt-based monetary system is a control mechanism as well, but the system that they want to bring in is more direct.
Yeah.
It's a more direct form of monetary control with all of these conditions attached to how you use your money. And then there's going to be monitoring of your brain activity.
Coupled with all of that, of course, which we haven't gone into yet, is the environmental controls. So they want to control the environment as well, and our interaction with the environment is tightly controlled. So it's not just control within your own brain and your own thoughts. They also want to control how you interact with the natural environment.
Yeah, and they will know whether you don't believe in climate change. They will know that.
Yeah, they will.
So it might seem a bit far-fetched, and it might take quite a few years before it gets to that stage, right?
Yeah.
But they're making this technology, and it seems that Charles Lieber was arrested for some reason. Did they just arrest him so that conspiracy theorists like us can
talk about it?
Can make up theories?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Because not many people have spoken about. I had to pay money for his latest paper. It wasn't available. The other paper was available on the internet, so no one's made it available, right? And people do seem to be trying to associate him with viruses, and he isn't.
Yeah,
that's not his work. He's more like a nano engineer, really.
Yeah.
All right. Now there's a lot of unknowns in this interview, Andrew. A lot of I don't understand the financial system. I don't understand this new system. What they're trying to bring in. I've given the viewer some ideas of things that I've looked at myself. I don't know where it's headed. If anyone's got more information on who's driving this and ideas about how we can stop it, obviously I'm against all vaccination, not just a COVID vaccination. I don't know where you stand on that, Andrew, because that's the thing that's happening now.
Yes.
They've started today with the first vaccination.
Yes.
Right. So that's going to then go into the thousands and the 10,000s and the millions.
Yes. Well, I mean, again, it's a part of a control agenda and forcing people into a situation, and again, it's the same scam as they've played before, but in a different form. They've put people into a state of fear to control them, so that they're willing to give up their liberties for salvation and protection. And this has just gone to an extreme level that it's intruded into every aspect of our daily lives. And this has been a dehumanizing year. That the humanity has been taken out of our general population.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was listening to an interesting interview with Daniel List and Catherine Austin Fitz. I think we've mentioned her name once or twice, and she mentioned, for example, how in churches and schools they banned singing. I mean, they've banned singing, for heaven's sake. And she points out, and I agree, that singing is when singing is a form of human expression, which doesn't really have any sort of evolutionary or anything like that, but function. And it's a way that we interact, which is abstract.
Yeah.
And she argues, and I agree, that singing is one of the ways in which you can change your state of consciousness, and you can connect with the divine realm, or whatever you want to call it. And therefore, by banning that, you are cutting off people's connection to those higher realms, or not completely, but you are more likely to do that. So whatever you think of churches, religion, worship of God, the fact that people sing, and they sing in groups, and they sing for a reason which isn't to do with surviving. It's going beyond survival. It's interacting with the
Well,
larger
the other
scheme
thing
of
is
things.
it's a group experience which
Yes.
you can describe as a spiritual experience.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
Rupert
what I mean.
Sheldrake spoke about singing when I went to see him last year, and he said that he doesn't consider it necessarily religious, but it's spiritual.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's what I was saying,
It unites
really.
a group.
Yes, yes. And so, why would you want to ban such a thing? This is dehumanisation. So, we're looking at, you know, that's what it is in a word. It's dehumanisation. They've sucked the joy out of life.
Yeah.
You know, and as Lord Sumption says, you know, I'll try. In fact, I'll try and get the quote if I can.
The other word is transhumanism, which has been on the agenda for quite some years. So
Yeah.
they've known it's coming. And it's ironic that Klaus Schwab claims that this new capitalism is going to put you in touch with nature, put you back and be in touch with nature.
Yeah, I mean, one of the people that's been outspoken in this, of course, is very mainstream, and he's really been focused on what the British government has done in a legal sense, and he's pointed out that, for example, what they've done, and he did this in a lecture to the Cambridge Law Society, I think, Cambridge University. All these things that we've been told to give up, affection, friendship from less than 6 feet away, and indeed large gatherings, family celebrations and companionships, all these things are not optional extras. These things are life itself. So that you know, I think that's a very astute observation, and I just wish that more people, you know, who are not the Lord Sumptions, these officials that are implementing all these measures, the head teachers, the police chiefs, the council officials that are, you know, making the orders to have these signs printed and put up. This is what they're involved with, this dehumanisation agenda, the removal of things, just ordinary things. You know, how has this happened?
It's disgusting, and people must protest about it, and you won't get anywhere protesting about it online. If you want it all to happen and to turn to shit, stay on your seat and stay on Facebook and YouTube, right? Get off your arse, get out your house, organise protests, write to people who've got positions of responsibility, go and see them, bang your fist on the table and demand that, or tell them that you're not having it, and that you don't want any more of this nonsense that's going on, because it's been used to bring in a very, very dangerous dehumanising agenda that Andrew's just spelled out.
That's right. And I'd just like to say that I've been involved with a couple of people locally in the area where I live, Hayley and Nicola, who have organised, you know, sort of get-togethers in Nottingham and in Derby. And I think this is very important. You know, I was stood in front of a group of shoppers on a loudhailer a couple of weeks ago, and that was got a few raised eyebrows there. But at least we were out in public, you know, talking to these people. And it's not something I enjoy doing. And I'm not, you know, if it hadn't been for these other good people that were with me, I probably wouldn't have done it. But we need these, and the protest can take many different forms. It's not about, you know, marching in big groups necessarily, although you can do that. So there are many ways to protest, both in person and, you know, by writing letters and stuff. So do think about those things and try and do something along those lines.
All right, Andrew, well, thanks for your time. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
And perhaps we'll learn some information as well, because there's a lot of unanswered questions in all this. All right, remember, believe none of what you hear, including that vaccines are good for you, and believe half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.